What's up, everyone? Bradleyson Design here with another Discord critique. This week, we're going to take a look at about 15 designs from members of my Discord community. And I'm going to give them honest feedback on what I would do to improve on a graphic or things that I might like about it, stuff to continue to exploring with, and so on and so forth. So let me just tweak the settings real quick on my tablet so I can take a look at what we got going on. All right. So we're going to start off. This is by Nikio36. So this is a graphic of a Giants player that I do not know the name of because I'm not a Giants fan. Aziz is what he says. So this is a cool graphic, basically standing here, fistful of fire, border around it, city in the background. Very Darian Sharp, Matt Sharp, Darian Sharp. It sounds weird. Darian Sharp vibes. So let's take a look at what we've got going on here. You know, I like the flames. I think they're done. I think you have them applied to the graphic well. I think you got those on Footage Crate. We've got the border here, which I like. Let me use this so I can circle things. Border's good. But when I zoom in, like, there's no detail. Like, you've noise reduced this so much that he's just like a wax figure. It's like this smooth, it's just smooth everywhere. And like the background too, like this isn't a very defined city. It's really noise reduced and sort of blobby. You know, these are blobs instead of, you know, sort of sharp lines that are, you know, whatever the building would be. So that's something I would tend to not do. Is noise reduced so much. Sometimes the photos are terrible and you have to work with what you can find, but that's, you know, just a personal preference on me. When it comes to the flames, I think you've got a good light source here. I think you've got it here on the sides. You know, maybe I'd like to see a little bit more lighting up here in the face where this light would hit on the sides of his face here maybe. And then maybe in certain spots here. You do it here, but you do it across just here. You know, it doesn't really blend up here or blend up here as if whatever the plane that is facing that. You know, if it's a structural plane, you know, of someone's body, you know, I'm just trying to, you know, there's just different planes of shapes where someone's body would hit something. You know, a shoulder's going to have a specific angle that, you know, just it's angles, complicated stuff that I'm not explaining very well. But overall, I think it's pretty nice. I would just get rid of all the de-noising. It's not something I care for much. And then the background, like if you're going to put something in the background, make it so we can see it. You know, everything else like this sort of clouds and this texture and all this stuff is good. And this is nice, but it's just on like a wax dummy, essentially, is what it looks like. And I would try and blow back some of these highlights back in maybe, but maybe not. I don't know. Up next, we got OD Designs with this champion graphic 2020 to 2021. Now, just from an outside standpoint, like I know some stuff about sports, so I know this is Max Verstappen, but like you only have his name here a little bit, and then you kind of have his name here, and I don't see it anywhere else. So like that's going to be something that you're going to want to put on here more prominent. We can read 2020 to 2021. We can read that it says champion. We've got all the photos and stuff, but from someone from an outside standpoint, you know, they might have no idea who this is if they don't watch F1. I really like the orange over here contrasting with the white with him split in the middle. I think that's a good composition to use. And then you kind of fake it around here as to where it hits, which I think is fine. There's not really an easy way to do that. The clipping on the car, I mean, if you look at that, everything looks pretty solid. There might be a couple soft spots, but that's stuff I have all the time. I feel like I would want this shadow to be slightly blurred. You know, maybe on a separate layer with a slight blur to it. But if that's what the car looked like on the ground, then that's fine. But it should have maybe some texture to it if they're on like concrete or something like that. But actually, the clips, I like the clip. It doesn't look like you missed any spots here. Everything looks, I don't know why I circled that. Everything looks pretty good. So that's solid. Let's zoom out here. I think the composition as a whole is pretty solid. You know, you've got a hierarchy where you're basically trickling your way down to the car. Now, the car itself, I think, is flirting with the edges too much. You know, you have his head purposefully going off the top here as a breaker between the sides, which is fine and good. I just think this car is a little big. I probably would have tried to box the car in to have balance on each side and then balance on the bottom, which sort of equals it for padding. So I would have shrunk this down, I don't know, 5% to see what it looks like, 10%, because you're still going to be able to see the car. And everything is dwindling down to this. So if this is a smaller asset, you're just creating a further hierarchy of this is 1, then 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you see 6. Right now, it's sort of, this might be 1. You might look here first when you look at this object, and then you go up here to see the photo and come down. And then if you did that, you'd be able to read champion a little bit better. I mean, you can still read it, but it would be easier to read because like this, we can fill in the blank that this is a P, but it could be a D, it could be a B, we don't know. But using common sense, it's obviously going to be champion. I like the gradient you have going on in the background here. I think that's nice. And you've got the M. I don't think you need this M here. I probably would have put like maybe a cityscape of where that is, where the race was. Same over here. That's sort of something everybody does though, so having the M there kind of is nice. I don't know if he has an actual logo. If this is his actual logo, then ignore what I said. Put the logo on there. Cool. Sounds good. Overall editing of the photos looks pretty solid. Now I drew on all of their faces, so I can't really see. I like how you probably whiten the eyes up a bunch, which is something I do. A couple of designers do. That's pretty fun to do. I don't know if I'm crazy about this sort of like drop shadow you've got going on. I'm not 100% certain what that is. I know it's there to create contrast, but I would get rid of that. And then like right here where his helmet is touching over, I would have scooted this guy over to be right here. I get that you have him sort of in the middle, but nothing else is in the middle. So I think if you would have put his head right here and maybe made him a tiny bit smaller, so these guys don't all have the same size head. I mean, they're very close right now. I would have then adjusted the position of the car to offset the balance. So maybe this guy's over a little bit to the right. This is over a little bit to the left and smaller. So then it takes up a certain amount of space. And then you could fit his name here, Max Verstappen. You know, that's just a couple thoughts. But overall, I like it. I like the overlays you've got going on in the front. All in all, it's pretty solid. Just a couple compositional tweaks that I personally would have done. And again, these are all my opinions, you know. Just my advice. Take it or leave it, but nothing too terrible with that graphic. Overall, it's pretty solid. We've got this graphic here by Conan Designs, as you can read right down here. I think this is a decently placed tag. It's not too distracting. It's down here in the side. Contrasts pretty well. Maybe make it smaller. Who knows? Up to you. It doesn't really matter. Let's see what we've got going on here. Compositionally, we've got big guy. You definitely see this first. And then it's like a tie between these two. You know, maybe this is second and then this is third. This contrasts pretty well with this globe with him inside it, though. Let's see what we've got going on. So like, I like what's going on in the background up here. You've got this Brooklyn Nets text that you've got kind of glitched out a little bit. That's kind of warping upwards with the sort of, you know, Nets logo that you can tell it's a Nets logo if you know what the Nets logo looks like. Otherwise, it just looks, you know, it's just texture, which is good. So I think that's nice. I think down here, you know, it gets a little, I don't know, it's a little too grungy. Like there's a lot of contrast. It's really heavy to bright blue to black. And I don't, all in all, I don't understand why. Solely out of context because there's no blue with the Brooklyn Nets. It's like, why blue? Now, it would just be black and white otherwise. You're probably trying to play with color. You're probably trying to do some lighting stuff here. Blue's an easy color to do. And if that's the reasoning, then that's fine. No problem with that. I do like the exploration of the type here. You know, this is Kyrie Irving. You're most likely sending this to basketball fans. Maybe make his name a little bit more noticeable if people don't know who Kyrie is. You know, you've got Brooklyn Nets up here that you can read separately, Nets and Brooklyn. Maybe you put Kyrie and Irving up here somewhere in the background so they can find the full picture. But if you kind of know what basketball is, and like like this, if you kind of know what F1 is, you know who this is. It's not 100% needed, just advice. But you do have Kyrie on here, and you do have Irving. I do like what you're doing here with this text, playing around. I probably would have made this white just for contrast reasons as well. You can read it, but like right here, it gets a little difficult to read. That to me is a little bit of a personal preference. Let's see here. You've got a little bit of some motion blurring going on. I'm not sold on it right here. You know, it's sort of the, what do they call it? Like a quick flash, speed flash. You know, he's like kind of jumping through time. Like it's not a realistic blur. I would have, because the back of his head would have been somewhat blurry as well. It's just like a nice clean cut. Oh, and by the way, there's another layer of him with a motion blur applied to it behind him that I added. Just a thought of something to try and use a different type of blur. I'm finding this really hard. I've just like looked at this just now. It's just like it's just very crispy, which is fine depending on what you want to do. It just, I don't know. I just stared at that and I was just like, it's hard to focus on. But that's not really what we want to look at. We want to look at these other areas here. So you've got this like snow globe, I guess, that has Kyrie in it. That's blue. That's emitting this light on his face here. I think the application of this is a little too harsh just because everything is super blue. Now, it might be that way. It is close to his face, but I think even so, it's just a little harsh, a little heavy-handed on the application. I think you've got the right idea of what would be blue. It just seems to be done at like 100% with a heavier hand than something done a little bit more delicately. And same thing down here with like the hands. First off, I can see like some of the clip here where he's holding a basketball where there would be a shadow. The issue is you're gonna have to basically just fake this and stamp this out so you don't have these lines. But like the back of this finger is blue, the back of this finger is blue, but then this one's not. Like this would be more accurate if it was faded in a little bit more of how the lighting would be. These guys are just blue all the way somehow. So it's something I would pay attention and tweak a little bit. And then if this is, I'm assuming this is a snow globe or something supposed to be a snow globe. So with that, I would probably have some sort of like spot highlight or something on here to like really show us that this is glass. Because right now it just looks like a circle and you've got a little bit of a highlight up here. But, some sort of spot highlight on the front to show that there's some sort of depth and that Kyrie is in there. Those are just a couple notes of something I would do. Again, I like the background. Keep playing with lighting up here. Keep playing with some of the clips and improving on the lighting. Good exploration of type. I would choose a slightly different way to do the blur there. And those are the general notes that I would have on this design. Next, we've got this Bradleyson design. The Spider-Man design. Right off the bat, personally, I've talked about this with a different design of his. I'm not crazy about the muted colors. I don't know if you said anything on that. So like, I've said this before, like Spider-Man's red. A Coke bottle is red. Brands are red and Spider-Man is a brand. So like Spider-Man would really need to be, what if I want to take this away, add that. What do I go to my magentas, take away magentas, add black. I'm just trying to like show you what I think it should theoretically, this is red. I just don't like the muted colors. It's just very pink and muted, but if that's your style, then, to each their own. Let's take a look at the actual design now. So I get what you're trying to do with some of this grass down here, using like a grass brush, but I think it's a little too heavy-handed. Like, tone this down. You know, I use grass brushes, but I use them very gently down here at the bottom like this. You know, otherwise it looks like you just brushed off part of his foot. It looks a little bit better over here. Or, you know, clip out some grass and put it in front. Because, like, right here, it just looks like his backpack is turning transparent. Fix the clip a little bit over here. You see the little white fringe on the backpack. Just tighten that in 1 pixel, and it will look insanely better. I mean, the composition. So, like, if we're talking compositionally, you know, it's pretty solid. You know, I personally would have moved these guys over, like, to start here, just to make them, like, dead center. But, like, what are you going to do? And that's just because the backpack offsets this over to the left a little bit. So that's a little personal preference of what I did. It looks like you built this background maybe, and I think you did that pretty solidly. So good job on that. But then, like, the crown up here. The crown, I feel, if this is his head, you know, the crown would be at a different angle. You know, it would have some sort of curvature to it going around the head, where this is just a straight crown. If it's actually on a head, it's going to have some sort of curve to it. So I think that's a little bit not true to what it would look like. I don't know if you just pulled the Spider-Man photo from the internet or what, but if you didn't and stitched together, I think that looks nice. But simple graphic. The overlays are nice and stuff. I just don't personally like the muted colors for something that's supposed to be a very specific brand color. You know, if I made something and it was Captain America, and you can tell it wasn't red, white, and blue, which Spider-Man's pretty much red, white, and blue too, it would be slightly off or look weird. Or, you know, if I made something for a specific team and the colors are off, someone's going to tell you it needs to look like this. It has to be this specific color. Up next, we've got RWeirs Creative. And I never say these names right. But anyway, we've got the goat here. Goat graphic of Brady wearing the jerseys of what he has worn. Composition's pretty cool. I really like what's going on, you know, above this line. And even with the lights, you know, I like everything that's going on up here for the most part. Composition, you know, there's balance, there's white space, which is good. Maybe you don't need the moon, but you did it for lighting, which looks decent, so I don't think that's a problem. That's just preference. Maybe a couple clouds instead, but, you know, not a big deal. Then you've got 3 Bradys down here. I think these guys are a little too crowded. I would have made them all just a little bit smaller and just spread them out so they had a little bit more spacing behind them or in between them. Let's zoom in a bit here. Just take a look at what you're looking at. So I think what you're trying to do was light source. Let's light these guys up with the light source. But this is also on fire. I'm assuming he has a fire and he has a fireball as well. I'm just like going to jump around. Shadows look pretty decent, so that's good. So things on here that I would tweak. I think some of these areas are too dark. I think this is a good start for the lighting, but I think there would be areas where I think some of these areas might be a little too dark based on the shadows, because his face right here would technically get hit with the light. You know, this is nice. I think that's pretty good. I think you could just have gone in and done a little bit different highlights or been a little bit more gentle with the shadows. That might have helped. This Brady's not too bad. I think the issue comes here where you have this light source, but you also have the light source over here. So technically, you know, this whole area would be lit up. And if you're going to have the fireball be on fire, you have some of the light here, which is good. But you don't have any of that light on his face. You don't have any of the light on the top part of his jersey here. You have it here, which is good. So like this is predominantly solid. And you've got some down here. Really brighten this area up. Anywhere this light source is going to hit, which is going to hit this part of his jersey, You know, it might not hit like this part from where his hand shadow would be, but you'd have to figure out, you know, what that angle would be. Complicated things like that. I think the flame itself, you know, it's really yellow right here, then just kind of cuts off. It looks kind of weird to me. Could just be the stock image you did. But if these balls are all going to be in fire, you need to make sure that their faces are lit appropriately to match that as well. And that's the main thing that I think I would fix from this. Make these guys a little bit smaller and just keep practicing the lighting. I like that you're trying to do new things with lighting and stuff like that. And then if we come up here, I'm not a big fan of this look. Like, I get what you're trying to do, and it kind of works better up here, but like, you know, solid image of a decently solid image of a Buccaneers helmet, decently solid image of a Wolverines helmet. You know, you've got some blurring. I don't know if there are issues. I guess that is the helmet, so it wouldn't be issues. But then you've got this like really crusty JPEG'd Pat's helmet. So like the quality of the helmets don't match, which is a little bit distracting. But they could theoretically make a helmet that looks like this with this exact jagged edge. So that's why that doesn't bug me as much. But when we get here and we just zoom in, I mean, this looks like, you know, you just went in and just sort of scribbled around. It was like, oh, here, this is strands coming off, which is, you know, fine. It's just not that realistic. It would be harder but more efficient, or not efficient, but be more realistic if you did it, found what looks more like this, I guess, but more ragged clothing. Basically, you're taking away all the texture of what would actually be ripped, but it depends on how you're trying to emulate it. You know, is this the ripped jersey effect, or is this some sort of like Venom, the jersey's taking over effect sort of thing, you know? Because then you just have like random spot here where it's not the same. That's not really a look that I've actually explored into going to, just because I don't know a good way that I would personally do it. I do like how you have goat on here though. And I think the lighting up here is done well. I think the lighting overall, I didn't even notice it. So I think that's all done well. It's just a little bit of the lighting issues down here. Maybe find a less generic photo too. But all in all, pretty solid. All right, we got Kibble. He wanted me to humble him, so I told him that he lost. So Lewis Hamilton lost, so sorry. Very similar to the other graphic. So, you know. Is this the same design? Did you submit 2 of these? And then tweak things? I don't know. Whatever. So we're going to talk about this graphic. It's pretty much the same as the other graphic, and it looks like it might have been made by the same guy. There's a lot of stuff going on here, but I think it works. You can actually read his name a little bit more. I would bump this out a little bit so you can actually read Lewis Hamilton. And then, you know, bump the car up a little bit so the car's not flirting with the edge here. Give it some nice space so the car is, you know, floating higher, so it's not irritatingly close to the edge. Then you got guy in the front too. Then maybe move champion up a little bit so you can read champion a little bit better. Same thing with his text. I like the 8 here. Maybe you put world champion in the text here so you can read it a little bit better. I think the editing of the photos of these is nice. You've got big, little, and then a bunch of little guys that kind of blend in together, but I think that's all I'm going to say about that one. What else? We've got this by Jacoby, a Lions design with Ford Field. I don't think I gave any advice to this yet. Great. Okay, so like right off the bat, like this effect is way too harsh. This ripped paper effect. And the only reason I say that is because when I'm designing something, I want to know what the theme is, what the style is of the design. Are you making this a rough paper graphic where it's supposed to look realistic as if it's on paper? Or do you want this to be a photo manipulation where these guys are on Ford Field, you know, and this stuff is supposed to look realistic? Those are things. So I try not to merge or meld those two together. But if I do, I want to make sure it's super intentful. Like this is a postcard and has a stamp on it and scribbles on it. It's on a table that it looks like a postcard. So to me, I feel like you just tossed this on there because it's a texture and you thought it needed it. It doesn't. I can already tell that this forward field image is terrible quality, which if that's the image, that's the image. There's nothing you can really do about it. But I would have gotten a slightly bit better image. You know, clip this out a little bit better, especially with these straight lines. Just use the polygonal lasso tool and just click, 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 click. You know, make a little selection and then delete that mask out because it'll be a lot cleaner. Then we go up here. You know, same thing with the forward field. Like this image is a little wonky. It looks like some stuff over here is like blending into the background. As you can see, it's like kind of turning blue. Why? You know, why is it doing that? Is that intentional? Clip here's a little dirty. You know, it blends in over here too. Is that intentional? If so, why? It's blending it up here. Like to me, that doesn't make a lot of sense. And then same thing, like the text here has an edge to it. Why? You know, why is there an edge to that? Now, I don't know if you're designing this on your phone or if you're designing this on a computer, which could be reason being. I generally only know how to give you advice based on how stuff is done in Photoshop. So to me, some of this stuff doesn't make a lot of sense because you just have sort of like, here's a lens flare that exists. Here's another lens flare that exists. You know, it might be off of this lens flare. But it's stuff applied generically instead of applied with more finesse, I would say. And I don't get why there's a big sign up here. And I don't even know what this says. Like this just says lines on T. Like you covered up the rest of it. I don't know what this is supposed to say. So make sure if you have text on there, you can read in the entirety of what it's supposed to say. That's what I would suggest. All right, we got another banger by Narrow Designs. Really bold graphic of Trevor Lawrence. He's got, there's a pretty good photo composition going on. You know, cool little jaguar thing going on up here. But it just like ends right here, so I'm kind of confused why it does that. Like it's the back of the head, but like what is that? You know, maybe you'd have to tell me that to tell me for sure. There's a helicopter for some reason, which is fine. And again, I said this was a jaguar, not a panther. Or panther, not a jaguar. I don't know. I think all this stuff over here looks good. I think you built a really nice scene with depth. This is behind this, which is behind this. And there's this bridge going through that works out. That's blurred in the front. But then you also have it blurred in the back. Like, why is the jaguar who is behind this blurred, but also the front stuff is blurred, but this isn't blurred and this is in focus? It's just sort of, from a realistic camera standpoint, the depth of field makes no sense. I think if you blurred the edges with like an iris blur, if you just blurred the edges so everything outside that was out of focus and all of this was in focus, it would make more sense. Because like, I have no idea why this is blurred. To me, in my brain, it makes zero sense because this right here is super crispy behind it, but Lawrence is in front and is crispy as well. So what's up with that? And then when we zoom in, you've got a lot of, you have a lot of grain on here, but I think it might be purposeful and added after the fact. I'm not crazy for it. I probably would have kept the grain out of it because I think it just makes his skin look weird and need a little bit of color noise reducing, but I think it's something you apply to the whole image at the end. So like compositionally, I think it's good and I think it's lit well. I just like, why are his feet blurred? Why is this blurry? You know, it doesn't make any sense to me. I think if you didn't have that and didn't have this blurred, it'd be pretty decent. I'd then probably say I think his face is a little too dark. You know, just it looks a little dirty, just a little bit odd in the face. And it could be because his eyes are glowing. That might be the reason why I think that. But I think as built together as a whole, I think you did a good job. Just why are his feet blurred? I think is what we're going to bring up again. All right, and we've got Dorian with another Saints graphic. Shock. It's like me and Chicago Bears graphics. So let's see here. I have no idea who this is. He plays for the Saints. He's number 29. But I don't know what this word is in the background. I get an A right here. I get a D here. I get an O. This might be a G. No idea what this is. A Dago, a Digo. You know, it could be anything. So if you're going to do that, make sure that you can clearly figure it out after the fact. You can cover text up fine, but have his name on here in small text or something that's readable. Use this as just a pattern textural element and then have his name somewhere we can read it. Because the client's going to say, because here's what's going to happen. You're going to make this for the Saints. You're going to send it off to them. They're going to say, this is a cool graphic. Don't cover his name up. We need to be able to see his name. Or one of the keys in the task that you would be sent would be like, put his name on it. If you cover it up, they're going to say, we can't read his name. And someone who's not creative, and I get why you did this as a creative, someone who's not creative is going to say, why does his name look that way? I like the little displacement you've got going on it. I like what's going on, but I can tell it's the exact same here. So just use the same displacement on the whole page. So then all the displacements are slightly different, so it doesn't look like it's repeating, is what I would have done. I like the dots in the background. I like the texture. I think you've got all these little tiny elements framing in the design, which is great. All good. This paper overlay is good. It's in the background behind some of the players, so it's fine. Maybe tone down the middle creases a little bit, because the little creases are, to me, a little generic. So I think avoiding that might help this design a little bit. And then the last thing I would say, I like the composition, and I've talked about composition a lot. 1, 2, 3, definite composition where I'm supposed to look. If you put his name right here, it fits right in that composition of where the viewer is going to move their eyeballs. So the last thing I would say is make sure the whites are all the same. You know, this right here on this top image is very yellowish and green. Right here, it's very magenta. Here, it's a little bit of magenta and cyan, but all the whites are different. So go in and neutralize the whites based on the image. They're going to be contaminated from all the field color, the lighting. Decontaminate them, make them more pure, non-saturated white, and it's going to flow a little bit better as a whole. But all in all, I think this is actually a pretty nice graphic from you. All right, CT Design. We've got this Jason Tatum graphic, which you can read here, which I just realized there's text on here. Trying to look and verify that this was Jason Tatum. So right off the bat, if you're going to put text on there, make sure we can read it. You know, you're putting green on a green background with a little bit of an inner glow, which, you know, okay. I would just make this more clear because I'm trying to come at you with critiques and advice that I would get back from a client. If I send something off, I would know immediately they're going to say they can't read this. Just make this white. Put it somewhere so we can actually read it. Because if you made it white, you'd probably be able to read it. Maybe there's a container on it that makes it so you can read it better. Because you can read power forward for the Celtics just fine. So I would have made this white. And then, you know, the number 0 here, maybe you make this a little bit more prominent. You've got the Celtics logo ghosted on here. I would get rid of that. Put it on here normally. Because again, a brand's going to be like, don't make our logo semi-transparent. They're just going to hate it. So that's, you know, make that a little bit more legible. All in all, compositionally, I like the background. I think the background's great. Your shadows look good, so that's good. You got a lot of lighting going on, but all in all, I really like the background. Good use of shape. There's good color contrast in areas. You've got some yellow peeking in here. Maybe a little heavy on the lighting overlays, but I'm not too worried about it. You've got this random line going on right here. Like, I don't know what that is. Like, what is this line? You know, fix whatever that is. It's kind of weird. But all in all, the only thing I really would have done was compositionally, I would have balanced these out a little bit better. I probably would have moved Jason's head to be right here. So then he comes over and then maybe scooted him down a little bit here, just so there's a little bit more balance. Because you've got the middle Jason dead centered pretty much. And then you've got all this action going over here. So if you were to move him over here, it's heavier balanced over here, but then this offsets it. And the reason I would move him over is based on how much space you have down here. You've got this nice balance going down here, pretty much the same. If you move him over, you've got this big area here of stuff. Now, white space is fine, but you'd have him be like here instead. So he'd be taking up this space, and then you'd have this Jason over here. Now, yes, I get if you moved him, you wouldn't be able to see this green basketball as much. But do we want the green basketball to be the focus of this graphic or Jason Tatum? I think the lighting's a pretty good go at it. Nothing really bugs me on it. This looks pretty good over here. I like the lighting on the leg here. Maybe gets a little weird here with his hand based on, maybe this is shadowing him. I don't know. This looks maybe a teeny bit bright, but all in all, it's pretty solid. So really just on this, I would have just tweaked a couple little things from a personal standpoint compositionally, but then the text you're going to have to play around with, I would say. Because when you posted it on Discord, I didn't even see the text at all. And a client's going to hate that from a client standpoint. From artistic standpoint, who cares? It's up to you on that. We got this by Hexy Design, Hexy Graphics, Ethan Hegman, a Kyler Murray graphic. So let's take a look at what we've got going on here. We got 4 Kylers. We got a rock in the front. We got a scene in the back with a cactus and a sky, and then I think his logo. Okay, it is an M. See, like you distorted, I believe you distorted his logo, so it's kind of hard to tell what it is. So I probably would have just kept this the same. Again, brands, logos in general, don't do anything to them. Put them on their normal colors. Put them on their black and white. Don't distort them or do anything like that, unless it's supposed to be some blown out, purposefully textural element. Whereas this, it looks like it's not supposed to be textural. It's supposed to be, here's his logo. I would have just put it. And it just, I don't know why it's up here. You don't have anything up here. I would get rid of it up there. Just put it down here in the corner or something. Or put it here in the corner and then put your logo down here. From an editing standpoint, I've done some stuff sort of like this. Cutting off bodies, based on arm parts. Based on where like a photo ends. But I think this it looks a little odd to me. I like that you have this rock in the front. 2 things. I don't think it's blurred enough. Blur it more. And 2, it's not red enough. You've got all this red rock and red clay, and then you've got this just like brown gray stone. It doesn't match. Put a color tint on here to tint it to match the background so it makes more sense. And if you're going to put one here, put a couple more down here or something to really frame this in. I think the background image, you probably could have found a little bit better of an image. And then you probably could have used the same sky or used a sky replacement tool, because I could be wrong, but it looks like you might have tried to clip it out. And I think it just would have looked better with the original sky, but I could be wrong on that. I don't know if you put this cactus here or not. I feel like you did, but I could be wrong. Anyway. Okay, Kyler's himself. I think these by themselves look pretty decent. I think you've got a lot of the fire going on. This is pretty solid on the front guy. This yellow down here to me doesn't make a lot of sense. I get that this is fire. This wouldn't be so much yellow. It might be just a little bit warmer. But the scene and environment doesn't make sense then, because this would be a really bright day to have none of these shadows, high noon. But then you've got this sort of dark, ominous sky that doesn't fit, but nothing else is dark. And if this is emitting light, it would light this area up. So if anything, you would do like a nighttime scene, and then this would lighten up. Otherwise, I would just make this a little bit more orange, or just get rid of this coloring, because I think it's weird. I don't think it adds to it like you wanted it to. Composition, though, I think is pretty decent. I get that he's lit from the back, but you know, it's also like a bright day, so he wouldn't be this dark. If he had a dark background, I think this would look a lot better. I don't think it looks bad. I just think it would look better if you had a darker background, a darker scene. That's pretty much it. I think the other photos are fine. I would have found a different way to do something here. Maybe put his name here so it distracted from this, or maybe have this image come down but fade it in with a gradient mask, and then put Kyler Murray here so it kind of overtakes the eyes so they don't focus on what's behind it. That's probably what I would have done for that. I think we got a couple more. I don't care how long this video is. I'm trying to give you guys the best feedback I can. We've got 5 left. Okay. Darian Attridge. We got this Darian Design. Chad Ochocinco, 95. I think we've got a pretty decent composition going on here. Trying to play around with like the Ethan J zoom with the color blending on here. It's always a fun thing to play around with. I think it's so it's like right here when it's on the player itself, I think it can kind of get distracting. I know I've done it before, but you just have a couple random things on here. Let me look and see. Like I like that you're doing this with the scratching, but there's nothing behind it. You just have like default generic, this is now gray. There's nothing back here. If you're going to do that, put something back there so it actually looks like they're ripping through something. Because it just looks like you're ripping into a void of nothing. I really like the text that you've got going on here. I think, you know, I would pull back on that effect. I don't think you needed that blending effect as much because I think it takes away from how nice this looks. Because it's just, I see a lot of yellow and pink instead of the solid color. I can't focus on what it actually is. I probably would have taken this Chad Ochocinco graphic and rotated it a little bit and have him like falling this way just to like kind of BS it a little bit more. So he's really wrapping around this corner because there's a little empty spot here. I feel like he would just fit real nice with this text in the corner compared to counterbalance these two guys here. I don't know why you have this oil texture. It just seems a little generically placed. I love me a good topographic map, so I'm not going to say anything bad about that because I like topographic maps. But I like how you're trying to add some texture here with some of these elements. I think that's a good idea. Whoops. And you've got a little bit of, like, this is a little bit of this texture is good. I think this is just like, oh, here's a photo of oil that I made black and orange sort of thing. And one thing that doesn't make sense to me, this is something I would have changed. You've got a shadow down here from him here, which makes sense because you kind of have a light source here. But to me, this isn't a real photo manipulation where you can ignore that. And you've got a drop shadow for the numbers, the name, going on this back sort of piece of paper. I would have just put a shadow back here then, just like to match this instead of have one down here at the ground, if that makes sense. And they probably would hate that this is slightly blurred or whatever, but I like that it's sort of just a textural element. I probably would have done it with just like another one of these and not the logo and just put the Bengals logo somewhere, you know, down here or somewhere normal, untouched. But that's just me. But overall, I think it's pretty solid. Shady Baby 10, we got this 2022 Storm schedule. So this is clearly a schedule for the Storm IFL team. Initial thoughts, I think the border, I mean, I could, like, the border I can tell has been duplicated. Like, it's the same here as the same here. Figure out how to make it just one. And I think it's a little too distracting. I probably would have just gotten rid of this border, to be honest. Because I think you've got this nice blue, this nice sort of brush white that might need a little bit of texture to it. And then you've got this nice red with this nice texture applied to it. So I don't think you need the border exactly. Now here's the thing. if I made this schedule, I would have made a couple different variations where this background is white and this is red, and or this is blue and this is red, and then where this is blue and this is white and this is red, because there's no contrast here. Like, you have to have this like random shadow. So when you do that and make the different variations, it allows you to have the version based on the jersey you're putting on it. If you only have red jerseys, don't put it on a red background. Put it on a white background or put it on a blue background so it contrasts. Otherwise, it's going to blend in and just bleed together. I think it's nice that you have this sort of designation of home game has this background color to it, all games in CST. Maybe make this a little bit smaller in the corner. I like how you use that as the home team shape, though. I think in general, there's not the issue with doing this and having this brush is there's not a lot of continuity and spacing. Like when you look at this, there's this huge eyeball right here in this TBD because the spacing is way different here. You know, you can fit a truck through here, which is fine, but you can't fit anything through here. Make the spacing all the same and maybe just have this on their logos going off the side or something like that. Or do it in a way not using a brush, or do it with a brush that is tighter a little bit so you can have all equal spacing. Otherwise, it might look a little bit odd. I think all in all, I would have made this text a little bit more spread out with the tracking and kerning. And I would have probably tried to have a little bit more color contrast with how these are written out, because it's all the same. You know, maybe you have Friday, April, maybe there's a little bit of a tab and then the time. So there's a straight line coming down here. So everything lines up from the left, lines up on the right. Now that's me liking things lined up real easily. But then you could designate, you know, something else, I think, than the brush. Because I like how you're doing that, but I don't think it works here. Because just spacing wise, you want this space to be all the same. That's pretty much it, I think. But yeah, like I don't understand what's going on here with like the duplication on the outside, unless it's supposed to look like a stacked poster, but then there's no shadow. To me, I'm just getting confused, essentially. All right, we have this graphic, I guess, by Big Sexy, who I don't even know. Okay. Big Sexy here with this Terry Rozier graphic. Looking at this, I think the composition's decent. We've got a big and a little guy. Stuff going on in the background. There's a Hornet logo sort of in the background in neon, which is kind of nice. I feel like there's a lot of random white. Like this to me looks like he's, I don't know, like flying around heaven or something. Like there's a lot of white going on. And the Hornets have such good colors. They've got the teal and they've got the purple. So I think some of the lighting might be a little bright just because I don't know where the light's coming from. It's coming from like all sides and there's a lot of fog. I mean, I think this is nice. Like these guys moving these little these little hexagons sorry, that are floating up, I think are pretty solid. But then like I don't know where the light source is coming from, because you've got him lit here, but you only have him lit on this side. Then you've got big shadows here. I would have gotten rid of most of the lighting on here. And I think it would have been a little bit cleaner of a graphic. And then like he's clearly looking at something. Put something here for him to look at so the viewer then looks at it there. You know, I don't know what that would theoretically be. Those are a couple things that I would tweak with this. Now, it just seems very bright. And not in a way that I like, but I don't really know. Sort of a subjective thing. All right, last one we've got here is Vince King, Chiefs Kingdom graphic. Pretty decent composition here. the composition I was kind of trying to stay away with a graphic I made, but then ended up going back to it because it was requested to it. So let's see what we have here. From a balanced compositional standpoint, here are a couple things I would have done slightly differently. Line up the helmets. So put Tyreek Hill up here. Line up the helmets. Line up the helmets here. You know, move him up right here. Solid. This is lined up. These would be lined up. These would be lined up. These are lined up. Compositionally, it would be more balanced. I think the Mahomes image is a little bit more pink. You can definitely see it in the helmet where the blue bleeds in, but like right here, like make sure the jersey colors are the same exact color or a lot more closer in color, because that's something that I've personally had brought up in a graphic I sent off. This jersey looks a little too vibrant, dull it down a bit. So that's what I would have done. Now I get that you've got this light source from the right. I think it's a little too intense because I think this is actually distracting you from this nice composition work you did here. If I ever do something like this, I usually just have sort of a vague light source, not something that's so permanent and done intently. Background, I think, is solid. I think you need texture down here. Like, these guys are just hanging out. Like, this screams you could put just turf down here, something like that. Maybe it bleeds into a whole stadium shot in the background. But then even with that, I get that this is supposed to say Chiefs Kingdom, but you cover up Kingdom too much, I think. Now, I know it's Chiefs Kingdom. An NFL fan's going to know it's Chiefs Kingdom. But since these are supposed to hold pretty much, it's the same word. It's Chiefs Kingdom. That's the phrase. Just make them the same size. You know, Chiefs Kingdom going across the top here, I think would work a little bit better. Or maybe you move these up. Maybe put Chiefs Kingdom behind the players here so you can read it, because then only these little chicken legs are going to cover it. Maybe that, then you can boost everything up just a little bit. Spread the composition out, but other than that, I think you just need to add a little bit of texture to the background, maybe a little bit of texture on the text. Text the same size. Tiny composition tweaks is what I would do. And then lessen the layer of this light source on here maybe a bit. And that brings us back to our first design. So thank you guys for your submissions this week. I hope you guys got some good feedback out of this. I enjoyed doing these, so keep submitting. I think we already have a bunch for next week. If you want to submit something of your own, go ahead and hop into my Discord. The link is in the description below. You're more than welcome to join. I will take a look at whatever you want for the week. Other than that, I will see you guys next Tuesday, where I stream every Tuesday at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. And I will see you guys next time.